All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Real Talk, Gen X, Y, and Race in America. This is a virtual conversation between young women of color as they navigate through the emotional impact of systemic racism following racial injustices. This discussion is presented by Shades Magazine, celebrating all women of color, an online publication and information and resource site sponsored by Exceptional Women in Publishing, also known as EWIP. My name is Lyndsey Ellis, and I'm a member of the EWIP Board of Directors and assistant producer for Real Talk. Before we get started, I'd just like to get some housekeeping matters out of the way. Okay, so first off, our producers have muted your mic. However, if it is not, please be sure to mute your microphone now. For those new to Zoom, you can find the tools bar at the top of your screen or hovering your mouse along the bottom of your screen. There you can find the chat room and other tools you may need or may want during this discussion. If you have comments or questions for today's guest, you may place them in the chat room and they will be ready for today's host. Please be sure to include your name and your city. You can also ask for it to be asked anonymously. Feel free to disable your video if you so choose. Because we have several women taking part today, you may not see them all on the first page of the gallery view. So that means you'll have to swipe to the left to see all of those involved on today's call, or switch to the speaker view only just to see who's talking at the moment. We also have a lot of viewpoints that will be shared today. A reminder to be very respectful of all guests and participants. We are recording today's session for viewing on the Shades website later. Okay, so now let's begin. I'd like now to turn it over to today's host and moderator. Sydney Clark, a New Orleans native, is a multimedia freelancer and current graduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park, studying multi-platform journalism. Sydney is also a contributing editor for Shades Magazine. Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you, Lyndsey, for the introduction. And everyone, welcome. Since friends, especially girlfriends, often experience deep, multi-dimensional friendships, it's no surprise we have several friendships between our guests here today. First, we have myself, and as I introduce people, just raise your hand and wave. And I'm friends with our original #Girl Squad from July, MIGNON BLANC, KERRI EBANKS, MADISON Hunt, and KAMRI SYLVE. And joining me today are THERESA BERTINI from Chicago and MARIAN Cook from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And KAMRI, who's also friends with MIGNON, is joined by one of her friends, KAYLEEN Green, who, like KAMRI, lives in Lincoln, Nebraska. And also taking part in today's webinar are special guests SHARKISHA CUMMINS from Rochester, New York, and AIDA from St. Louis, Missouri. And we're going to jump in because we have lots to talk about. But please feel free to learn more about the panelists via a link in the chat, and it should be the very first thing that you see. All right, ladies, let's begin. So because we're talking about friendships today, I thought a good introduction question would be, what type of friend are you? Are you the type of friend who is always on time to parties and, you know, whenever you're going to meet up with a friend, such as me? Are you an overthinker? So what type of friend are you? And anyone can begin.
I don't mind beginning. I am the hype friend. I'm the believer friend. I am all about helping my friends achieve their goals friends. Like if you're doing something and you're passionate about it, I am following your passion and I will root you to the end. And I will make sure everybody knows, you know, that you are the real deal. So that's me as a friend. And I'm loyal too. So, you know, I'm down for whatever and I'm behind whoever 100%.
Thank you for sharing.
I can go next. I would say that I'm definitely the mom of the group, as I've been told several times by the people of my friend group, because every time we go somewhere, I'm like, okay, guys, did you think about X, Y, and Z? Did you pack this? Did you pack that? Are you prepared? Did you think about the possibility it might rain? Do you have an umbrella? And they're always like, no, relax. It's not that serious. But every time they need something like a Band-Aid or a sewing kit, I do have it. So I'm always prepared. So definitely the prepared mom friend of the group.
That's awesome. Who wants to go next?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You go.
I'm the fun auntie
if that makes sense, where I'm just down to do whatever, but I'm also like the ride or die friend. So whenever you need me, I'm there. Whatever you want to do, I'm 100% behind you. I will not indulge in like ratchet, adventures, but I will be there to support you when you do it.
Go ahead, KAMRI.
I like that you asked this question because I've never been asked this question, and I'll be honest. I mean, I'm friends with Sydney, Mignon, and KAYLEEN, and I don't know what type of friend I am. Like I'm always there for my friends. Yes, I really am, but I don't know what type of friend I am, and I don't know if that's a bad thing that I don't know that I should know. But like, I feel like I love my friends. I'm always there for them. I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to talk, but I don't know what kind of friend I am. So I don't know if Sydney, Mignon, or KAYLEEN, if y'all want to help me a little bit, because I don't know.
I would say a mixture of the mom and the party girl at the same time. Yes, you can cook a full course meal, but you will have a daiquiri on the side of that, having a good time.
Okay, I feel that. Well, then that's the type of friend I am. Okay.
Yeah, and the person is always late, but that's what we love about you, though.
Okay, better late than never.
You're right. All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. So sometimes I feel like I'm a mix of like Maxine Shaw and Khadijah James. I am that friend. I'm definitely that friend that's always late. So every time I say like, oh, I'm going to be there at this time, like Sydney will tell you, like, go ahead and add 15 minutes to that. Also go ahead and figure out like if I know exactly the right location that we're going to, or if like I've picked out one of 5 of many locations. If I've mapped out like, if there might be traffic. I'm definitely a friend that's like strategic in some areas, but like not strategic with my friend group, if that makes any sense. So where a lot of my college friends may know me as like the mom friend, the friend that always plans things out thoroughly, like that's not who I am for most part of my life right now, right? It's like very much so go with the flow. And so I'm not the friend you call if you need a Band-Aid anymore. Most of my friends have lived very far away from me, so I'm also like a great distant friend. Like for example, one of my lovely friends, THERESA, is on the same call, and we picked up like we talked to each other a week ago or yesterday, right? Because we're going to be on this call. It's not like, hey, where have you been? Like, why haven't you called me or texted me? It's just like, hey, listen, like you're over there, I'm over here. I know we have love for each other. And that's what happens a lot with my friend groups.
And for those who are just hopping on, we just opened up with our first question, which is simply, what type of friend are you? And so that was just KERRI EBANKS speaking. And so who would like to go next? Go ahead.
To kind of piggyback off of KERRI, I'm the one that's always early. And a funny story to go along with that is KERRI invited me over for like a goodbye party when she was moving out of her apartment. And she was like, I mean, if you want, like you can come at 8. And I was like, what do I need to bring? What food do you want me to make? Do you need chairs for people to sit in? Like, do we need extra drinks? Like, what do you need? And I came at like 7:30. KERRI was not even ready, like had not changed, nothing. And she was like, I guess if you want to put the taco bar together, you can. And I was like, anything that makes it better for you. Like I just try to support people as much as possible. And it really is the mom friend. But sometimes I have to stop myself and realize that I can be the mom friend while still being fun. So that's something that kind of is really hard for me, because I will like reprimand my friends and be like, that's not safe. Like I saw you, like it's really late. You came home at 5 a.m. Are you okay? So I need to be like, you know what, you do your thing, I'll do mine. As long as you're safe and supported, I'll have to back off. So
I will co-sign what THERESA said about herself. She has been, THERESA, I think you're 2 years younger than me. THERESA came in, I think the same year Sydney came in. I think I was a junior or a sophomore, and Sydney and THERESA both came in, and they've both been more supportive of me as like immaturity for me than I have been to them. And so it's like both of them, I can like co-sign for both of them that they are that friend that like you can always depend on.
Oh, thanks, KERRI. Who wants to go next? Okay, go ahead.
So my friends describe me as the wild friend. I'm the one who's gonna help you make not good decisions, but we'll have fun doing it, and I'll make sure you're safe, kind of doing it. I'm the risk taker. I'm really impulsive sometimes, which is it's good and bad. But I'm the one who's like, oh, you want to like move to anywhere in the world? Go ahead and do it. Like, let's pack you up. Let's do it. Let's do it today. Let's just get it done. I'm definitely the wild one. I don't always think things through, but I'm a good time though.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can classify myself as like one thing. Like I do have a little bit of like, I like to have fun, wild times, and then I do have a little bit of mom in me. It just really depends on the day. But I think most of all, I'm a very loyal person. Like the friends I have are friends that I've known and loved for years. And I think that's a good thing, but also kind of like sets me back a little bit because it's so hard for me to make new friends because I'm still like just really attached to my old friends. So that's just me.
Thanks, Mayor. And then KAYLEEN, you want to go?
Yep. So I'm pretty much like the friend that will deep talk with you no matter when or where. I don't know if that's a strength or a weakness because I think some people get tired of it. But I'm also one of like the first to dance usually. And I think I will all like my main goal is just like, let's just keep having fun. So I think no matter what's going on, that's like my let's have fun and like let's make sure we're emotionally okay because everyone's got stuff they're dealing with. So let's have fun, but let's also like deep talk and talk about what's going on in our lives because there's a lot going on. I think so. I think that's my friend stuff. There's not a specific title.
Yeah. And I think that's like the purpose of these things is like, we could be a combo. There's not one identifier that may sum everything up about it. So I think that's the beauty of, what type of friend you are is you can contribute many things to the table and to your friendships. So I want to lead into this next question, which is, what is your definition of friendship? Like, what do you look for in a friendship? And first, I want to go to AIDA and SHARKISHA for this question.
For me, when I'm considering someone my friend, it's what kind of relationship can I have with you? I'm wild with my friends, but I'm actually a really shy, kind of introverted person. So it's someone who can kind of help me realize my own potential because I'm also a little bit hard on myself. So my friends that I have 2 friends that I consider like friends, I guess. And we've been friends since like 7th and 8th grade. And they've really been the ones who have kind of like pushed me, and we just have a really good dynamic where it's supportive. It's really good communication. So even if we disagree on something, we can communicate because I can't do like disorganized communication because it worries me too much. And then I'm off doing something weird and impulsive. So it's a really good environment where it's like supportive. There's a really good amount of communication and type of communication, and we understand each other's love languages. So I know we talk about love languages as romance, but even with my friends, like I know one of my friends, she loves gift giving. So I hate getting gifts, but when she gives me, I'm like, oh girl, yes, like I love it, thank you. And like quality time. So we really just kind of get to know each other on a personal level so that we can help support each other and move through life together. So
that's great. And then SHARKISHA, what about you?
For me, I think it would be someone or people who are just kind of like free to like just kind of be themselves, and it frees me to be myself. Someone who moves without judgment, people who are risk takers and loyal, and I think that's like a big thing for me because I'm a little bit of an oddball. And like my friend groups are literally all over the place. I have a little bit of every kind of person that you can imagine in my life, and it is a big deal for me. And it is true, like what you said with like the love languages, like understanding like what they need for that friendship and what I need for my friendship. So for me, it's pretty much just that, just the freedom to just kind of be myself, and they can do that just by being themselves, and it allows me to just be my authentic self with them, if that makes any sense.
Great, thank you for sharing. And so I think this is a great leeway into my next question. What do your friendship groups and circles look like? And most importantly, for this topic, do they vary in race? And so anyone can answer. Go ahead, Mignon.
Okay, I would like to start by saying I'm a part of one of the best friend groups known to man. We're called the Fab Five. KAMRI, Sydney, Taylor, and Lyndsey. We've been best friends since college, and our friend group, while we sometimes think similarly, we're all completely different in our own ways. One's a scientist, two are journalists, another's an architect, another one's a speech pathologist. So we're all over the board, and we live on every different area of the country. So me in California, KAMRI in Nebraska, Sydney in DC, Taylor in between Baltimore and New Orleans, and then Lyndsey in New Orleans. So our friend group, though we are different in many different ways, we are so supportive of one another. I kid you not, like, I always joke and say, if I killed somebody, I know you guys would help me bury the body. But they're my best friends to the end of the world. And when they say friends are the family you choose, they are my family more than some people that are actually blood related to me. I love my friends to the end of the world. And while we're all Black, I do have some white friends that are as equally important to me, which I found was surprising because I didn't think I could make a connection like I've made with the Fab Five before. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. I love you, Mignon.
Love you too.
I can like jump in because yes, of course, Mignon is my friend. And correction, we've been friends since high school, freshman year. So that was, I don't know how many years ago. I'm bad at math. Y'all know. But with that being said, I wanted to tie in like the answer to the second question and this one. For me, I look for honesty in a friend. I'll tell you this, every single one of my friends are honest, and I can't be friends with someone if they're not honest. If I don't get that instant honesty from you, if I'm walking around and I have a booger in my nose and I go in the mirror and I see that it's there and you didn't tell me it was there, you're not my friend. And so, you know, I use that as a little bit of example, but a friend needs to be someone you can go to. And I want to say Sharkisha might have said it, somebody else might have said it, but it's that no judgment that I need in a friend, and my friends have that. So yes, the Fab Five, we are all African-American, all different shades of Black, but we are all African-American. But I do have some non-Black friends, white friends, Hispanic friends, who are true friends. But I think that word friend gets thrown around a lot, and being a friend is very different than being an associate.
Yeah, I agree. Who wants to go next?
My friend group is literally, like I was saying, it's all over the place. I have white friends, Spanish friends, Black friends, trans friends, friends on the LGBTQ all over spectrum. And it's important for me to have that kind of dynamic because I have kids. So I want to surround my kids with, you know, this kind of a worldview so that they can grow up and know that that's possible to have that kind of unity with people who may not look or love the same as you do. So that's kind of important to me. Like my closest two friends are my sisters. Well, they're not like blood sisters except for one of them, but like one is, well, two of them are white and like the other two are Black. And they're just like my heart and soul, like literally hide a body clothes, or maybe like lie to the cops clothes, because like hiding a body is a lot of work, as someone said. So, but like, yeah, we're really close, and that's important to me mostly because I'm really careful about the world that I cultivate for my kids.
That's awesome. That's a word. Who else wants to go next?
I'll go. I was a part of an organization in college that was very, like, we picked it was part of the orientation office. And so it was strategically picked to get people that are diverse so we can connect with the incoming students. And that like changed my whole perspective on like, not that I wasn't hanging out with diverse people before, but like making it a priority. Like if I'm not surrounded by people that are different than me, to find them. And so that was like such a flip from when I moved from Lafayette to Nebraska, because Nebraska, like, what is it, Cam? Like 8% of the people. I mean, like it's like this, the amount of people of color in Nebraska, 4%. Yeah,
I think it's like a full. Believe, if I can be correct, it's like 4%.
Yeah. Exactly. And so like there wasn't, you like looked around and I was like, where's the, I mean, coming from Louisiana, I was like, where's the culture? Where's the spirit? Where's the people? And like, I was like, all these people seem the same. But I mean, again, I know that's just very surface level and like, I guess, very judgmental of me to be like, all these people are the same. But based on looks, and that is a big component, I'm like, everyone looks the same. And so it was hard for me in the first year, especially going through my first winter, which was awful, to have to deal with that. So I was like, I need to find a community. I need to find a people. I need to find that, like, my friend group again. And so it was just like trying to find different nonprofits or different music scenes that people were going to, so I can try to build that. And it's still like, it takes a long time. And it's harder, I think, when you're out of school, because you don't just like you're not forced to be around with people. So like as a young adult, you have to like almost go on these like dates to make a friend with somebody. And so like it was just so weird trying to like find that. So I don't know, it's still kind of hard and still difficult trying to look for it, but yeah, working on it, but still there. It's important to me. It's like very important to me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And for those who are just hopping on, the question that I opened up this specific section with is, what do your social and friend groups look like, and are they interracial? Are they mixed? And so whoever would like to go next, feel free.
I'll go next.
I'll go.
So,
I'm sorry.
Oh.
No, you
sorry.
go, KERRI.
Okay. So I will say that my social groups have changed since college. So, like, for starters, it's not as easy as making friends in the adult world as in the college world, but it's also not as easy as making friends with people outside of your race, if that makes any sense. So for me, it's like, yeah, like you can make friends with coworkers, and you can make friends with several different other people, but even though it's like really hard to make friends out like as an adult, and that it's harder to make friends outside of your race, it kind of like puts less pressure on you to reach outside of your race, especially if it's like in the work environment, and especially if it's like not in a significant environment where you will be doing a lot of interaction, right? So rather than you speaking to like another white girl at a coffee shop, right? Like you're gonna probably speak to the Black girl at a coffee shop, because for me, especially working in Seattle, it's like I rarely see Black girls. So it's like I'm not gonna go out of my way to speak to the white girl when I need to be speaking to the Black girl, making friends with her. And also I think a lot has changed. And for me, it's a lot about what I did in college. Like I had to do a lot of like teaching in class, if you know what I mean. And so I don't want to do that as an adult. Like I sit up there and literally strategically think like, yeah, I can make this person like my friend, but like, will I have to go through the many necessary steps? Like, for example, this one person at work that I thought could eventually be my friend, my boyfriend had came to visit town, and Seattle's small, so I don't even know, like, it was very random, but like she saw my boyfriend, and she was like, oh, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I saw KERRI's boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah. And then she said something about like that boy. And it's like the little stuff you have to go over. I'm like, I'm not gonna go over like the little stuff, like not referencing my boyfriend as a boy. Like, you are 25, 26, like, if you don't know that by now, if someone didn't teach you that early on, like I literally check my watch and I'm like, do I have the time? Like, there is probably going to come a time and a place to do such things. But like, if I can be completely frank with you, like, I haven't made many white friends or like any other race. I probably made some more Asian friends, but like not outside of like, I've not made any multicultural friends outside of my own race past college. Like, just because it's like, I was willing to teach and give up some of that energy, but it's like, I don't necessarily know if I want to give up that energy right now, but it's also B, like, I continue to process it because I want people to give that energy to me, because there's a lot, like last time we talked about a lot of like unlearning prejudices in our own community, right? And so there's something that I know that I'm missing out, but like I don't know if I have the energy to like even give just so I can, receive.
Thanks, KERRI. And I know, MARIAN, did you want to say something?
Okay, there we go. I was struggling to get off mute. I was actually having this conversation with someone a couple weeks ago, and he was disappointed in his friends and how he felt like they didn't care about him, etc., and like they didn't uplift him and motivate him. But what my parents have always said to me, and what I'm a huge believer in, is that your actions define you, but almost even more so the people that you surround yourself with. And I'm such a big believer in that I am very careful about the friendships I make. And I know for some, like, the biggest thing I try to look for in my friends is people that are motivated, honest, loyal, and have the same political, religious, and just values as me. And I know for some that people say that, well, maybe not religious values, I should say, just believe in seeing the humanity in everyone and respecting everyone's differences, sort of thing. So some, I personally, I don't have many friends that are Republicans, and some might say that's a bad thing, but, or whatever, I don't care. I mean, I don't, like KERRI was saying, like, I don't want to waste my time trying to change someone's mind to see the humanity and say someone that's LGBTQ. I don't want to have to waste my time trying to change someone's mind to believe that immigrants shouldn't be kept in cages. I'm Hispanic. I don't want somebody who believes that. So that's what I look for in my friendships. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
And thanks, Mary. I think this is a perfect transition to one of the viewers who are on right now. And this is from Terry Allen. You basically just answered this question, but I want to get some other thoughts from the other people. What matters in friendships? Is it race, gender, economic status, or is it based on shared values, mutual respect, common support, and cultural comfort zones? Please advise and enlighten me. Go ahead, Teresa.
I can start with this one. So to me, and my mom is on this call, but like, my parents raised me to genuinely not care about, anything about a person as long as you have the same values. And, when you're 5 years old, you don't understand like what values mean. But as you get older, you understand, like what MARIAN was saying, you understand the LGBTQ community more, you understand about what's going on with ICE and what's going on, and you have these values in you. I think something that it matters to me in friendships is that I feel safe with my friends, but also at the same time that my friends will have uncomfortable conversations with me, because my entire life I have gone to predominantly white institutions, and I am Italian and German, but I do look racially ambiguous. So I have been used in like ads and in promotions for schools because of the way that I look. And, you know, for a long time, like I thought that that was cool. And I have a good, very, very good friend that is Costa Rican. And she sat me down and said, you know, like, that's not right. And I need you to understand that that's not right. And I need you to have this conversation with me to understand that, you know, you're put in this position and you have the voice to say, listen, this is not right. And I think just having friends, in summary, having friends that make you feel safe and make you feel comfortable and, you know, support you and respect you are very important, but you also want to have friends that will call you out on your BS, because none of us are perfect. And to think that you're perfect is flawed in the first place. So you need to have friends that, you know, you can have those difficult conversations with, especially with the environment that the world is in right now. And then be able to go back to your friendship and say, thank you. You know, I understand what you told me. I'm not going to get defensive. Let's move on and let's work on growing our friendship together. So.
That's great. Thank you, Theresa. Anyone else? We have, go ahead, Maddie.
I'm sorry, just to piggyback off of her point, I think it's just really important because I have a ton of friends with different views than I do. But I think just going off of her point, it's just being able to have those conversations, because I was having this conversation with my friend Samantha, who is Jewish. You know, she grew up in this religion while I grew up Catholic. And even though like those religions don't always align, it's still good to know that she's comfortable enough to come to me and talk to her about how she's dealing with her faith and vice versa. But it's just having that respect to understand that your friend may not have the same ideologies as you or the same values as you to an extent. You know, there are some things where you have to meet me to a point where I think every human is a human. And you have to respect that. And that has to be within the core friendship, and to acknowledge that, but also to understand that I may have a different opinion than you, and you may have a different opinion than me. But at the same time, I will meet you halfway to acknowledge that that's your opinion and this is my opinion. And having that open and honest conversation, I think, fuels a friendship to be completely open and organic and real, because unless you don't acknowledge those things, you're losing the friendship in the process. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just having respect for different opinions, values, perception is like a really big thing that people should be open to.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else before I move on to a Q&A from the audience?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something with that. Like, it is important to have like a lot of shared values in our friendship, and we don't have to agree on everything. We do have to agree on humanity and the rights of others. And I, like, on that, I'm 100% adamant. Like, I will not agree to disagree on humanity or someone's right to life or right to equality or right to anything. Like, I'll never, ever just agree to disagree on that. That is a deal breaker for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So this is a question from Janice Lee in the chat, and she says, for those who are looking for new friends, what has been your honest experience, good, bad, and different, with Asian Pacific Americans?
So I think I can speak on that. I don't know if you guys know about the West Coast or the Pacific Northwest Coast, but it's really like AAPI heavy. And so my really close coworker that has now become one of, I mean, you have to set boundaries, of course, but like I would legit call her a friend. Like if there's anything I need last minute about anything in life or like work stuff, it's like she's become a great friend. And so we have candid conversations about how the AAPI community and the Black community just like we haven't been able to kind of meet in the middle and get along, and how like some prejudices that come from her community about my community, like she had to like cut off, and like, you know, has to just, you know, speak on within her own family, and like vice versa. And so I will say, like, I think it's very different in terms of like what we've seen in the South. For example, I went to McMain, right across the street from you guys at Ursuline. And so one thing that I was talking to my friends about, that went to McMain with me, I was just like, the only thing that kept us from being so woven together, because those friends should be just as close with me right now as like Sydney is, right? So the only thing that kept us like not from being so woven together was our parents and their prejudices, right? Because it made no sense that like we went to a school that was majority Black, and then the other majority was AAPI, that like I can't just call some of them up right now and be like, hey, like, did you want to go do this, or you want to go do that? And it's not necessarily like our parents did not like pull us away and out of those friend groups, but they saw that as like a little hobby, not a hobby. They just saw that as a little like sparkle, right? They didn't push it. They didn't push us to say like, oh yes, like go to this event with them or go to that event with them. Like, for example, like I had to ask to go to like Tech Fest, right? But I had to like, if it wasn't for my friends reminding me when Tech Fest was, then like my mom would have never tried to look up and see when it was, right? Or like when it was happening in our neighborhood. And I think that's very important to say. Like I think it started necessarily with the generation before us, like holding on to that consistent divide, because our communities have been so intertwined. It makes legit no sense to me as to why we are not as close as like any, you know, like why we're not the closest foundation of race, or just like any multicultural groups, right? But especially in New Orleans, we, especially in like the South, Deep South, right? I don't necessarily know about the whole Southeast region, but the Deep South, it's really like Black and Vietnamese, or like Black and AAPI. And so I just could not understand, like probably for the last maybe 2 years, as to why we were not as close and why there's like so much tension between our communities. But I will say, living now on the Pacific Northwest, I still feel a sense of like little tension. I don't think it's like gonna go away overnight, just because like at the end of the day, it's like they own that part of the coast, right? So they are ones that are still sought after for like big tech positions and things like that, right? And it's like less Black American, so it's less for them to interact. But it takes everyone, and it takes smaller occasions, like for example in Chinatown, writing Black Lives Matter in like in various languages for everyone to understand. You know what I'm saying? It's little things like that, showing support from the AAPI community to the Black community to say like, you know, like we're not even gonna, we can address the tension later, but right now it's about all of us, right? It's about us together. Because also during the pandemic, before we had our whole big Black Lives Matter movement, the AAPI community was hit very, very hard during the pandemic. And like let's just be honest, you had a lot of questions in your friend groups that say like, you know, why should we care about this after what they've done to us for so many years? Like, I know that I don't know if you guys had that discussion, but I definitely had that discussion with just like, why should it matter? Because, the way that they've treated us in the past, like now they see like they're not better than us. And it's not that I think they ever really fully thought that, every single one of them ever fully thought that they were better than us, but it's like something that has come up in the Black community, Black discussions, in terms of like our relationships with the AAPI community.
Thank you, KERRI. And I think this is a good transition. I want to go to Madison now. And Madison comes from a blended family. And so if you can just go into that and then maybe talk about how your blended family has impacted your identity and like who you choose to associate with and surround yourself with.
Well, I'm Black, I'm Japanese, and I'm Filipino. Growing up with my grandmother and her side of the family, specifically, it was what KERRI said is just very real within like the Asian Black community, because we are very intertwined. My mother and her side of the family are all from the Bay Area. So like that area is predominantly Asian. And when you have, you know, the mix of culture with Black, it's always more of a disconnect on the simple fact that in the Asian culture, they cultivate their own. So it's their community and then everyone else. So when you have that disconnect of like trying to intertwine with like the Black and the Asian community, they're very similar, and very similar in not only culture, religion, food, you know, celebration, they're very similar. And like growing up, being able to combine those two communities into one family, because my family is very diverse. There is not one person that looks like the other. It's really strange. And whenever we go out, they really think that we're not related, but we are. But in that, it helped me realize that regardless of what religion you practice or what culture is real in your life, you're still a person. And looking at them as human and like humanizing them, which I don't think we do enough, you're more susceptible to being open to learning about their culture and what they choose to celebrate and what they choose to talk about. So I think personally for me, in my own experience, I've been able to be open to meeting new people from like all walks of life. I also went to New York, which is like the wormhole for different cultures. So that was also like a really big thing for me. I wanted to go to college to meet people from all over, because that's just what I've known my entire life. So I think growing up the way that I did, it was just more, I'm able to see the world for exactly what it is. And to be honest, it helped me grow as a person, because it allowed me to be able to have real and honest conversations with all races alike.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maddie, for sharing that. And we have another question from the chat, and this is from Janice Lee. What has been your experience talking to your friends of a different culture about politics if you do not agree with them?
So I told you guys this last time, and this, I mean, I consider some people who I work with to be good friends. They're not best friends, but they're good friends. And for the majority of our newsroom where I work, we all hate, I'm gonna just say it, we all hate Trump. It's just a thing. It's understood. Every time he comes on the TV, we speak about it openly because everybody pretty much is the same. Now, some people in different parts of the building, we know for a fact that they are Republican, that they stand behind him strongly. But when you have these conversations, sometimes they like to keep their views hidden. And for me, if I believe in something, you're going to know from my conversation on what I believe in. I may not totally say, hey, this is what it is, but the way I portray myself and the way, or how my opinions are formulated, you're going to understand where I'm coming from. And I think that transparency is important when you're having conversations with people, even if you don't agree with it. Like, I want to know after our conversation is over where your head's at. If we're talking politically, I want to know that. And, you know, during this time, I have found myself scrolling through some of my friends' lists on social medias and whatnot, and just pressing the unfollow button like it's nothing. Like, if I see something that you post and I don't like it and I don't agree with it, or that I'm just like, how can you even post that with followers like me on your list? Like, these may be people that I've gone to school with or I interacted with, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe you really still don't get it. That's where I'm coming from. And so I find myself doing that a lot. But I think, and this might tie in a couple of questions from earlier, I think when you do have the same political views as your friends, that creates another bond, like another layer just to add on, okay, I get you. And you don't have to have the same views, but I want to see your transparency. If you say you believe in something, stick up for it. And if I can just throw this in really quickly. So like I said, I am a reporter, and we had a viewer call into the station the other day and complain that our station was only reporting on parents who didn't want their kids to go back to school, given everything going on. And so I told her, I said, ma'am, that's not the issue. The issue is that everyone who does support having their kids go back to school doesn't want to publicly talk to us. They want to complain to us, but they don't want to show their face, and they don't want to have this conversation or say their views publicly. And, you know, I even had a woman reach out to me, say, you know, complaining about it again. And I said, okay, you know what? Can you find someone to talk to me about it? She says, yeah, sure. So I contact the woman, try to set up the interview. They set up the interview. Then the woman backs out of the interview and she says, I don't want my face shown on this. And I'm like, okay, well, how about we do an anonymous interview? Well, people are crazy and I don't want my voice even on there. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what you want me to do because I don't have anyone to talk to me about this. So that goes back to my transparency. If you say you believe in something and it's from a political aspect, speak up about it. Show your belief and don't hide it. And I think when you're friends with someone who has that different, you know, mindset, it's important that that is put out there. It just is. And we can continue to be friends. We can continue to have conversations, because teach me, I want to know why you think the way you think. You know, I want to know that. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share? Yes, go ahead.
So the different culture thing is really big in my house. My husband is Rwandan. And a lot of our friend groups are people who are African. And then I lived in Jamaica, so we have friends who are from Jamaica. And we just have a lot of kind of different cultures around us. Our experience has not been that great in talking about different things with race, because, or like culture and politics, because kind of what KERRI was talking about with the Asian Pacific Islander population and Black people, it's like we all have these different stereotypes of one another. And when we come to talk about them, it is just, I don't know, like with some of his friends, I'm a teacher too. I teach kindergarten in public schools, and my area is a lower socioeconomic demographic. And we get into these discussions about like how teachers are not doing their job because kids are not learning, and Black kids can't learn because they're too busy trying to be like Cardi B and everybody else. And I'm also very much free woman too. And a lot of our friends who are African, they're more conservative in like their views and the way that kids should act and women should behave. So me being the wife of an African man, when his male friends come around, they expect a certain thing from me, and I'm not that. And it turns out it gets really tumultuous, where I don't want to be surrounded with people who all think the same way as me, because I don't think I'll learn that way. But at the same time, there are some views that can be really hurtful to a group, whereas I try and preach a lot of like, hey, we're like, I know like a lot of African people don't consider themselves technically like Black because in their home, they're not Black, they're just people. So I get it, but I'm like, okay, but you have to understand, like, these are the stereotypes that we've seen of you versus the stereotypes that you've seen of us. And if we can't talk about those stereotypes without blowing up every single time, then there's not gonna be any progress in the way that we view one another. Because I have a lot of African friends who feel like, well, I'm the exception of Black Americans because I'm not lazy, because I went to school and I did whatever and whatever. And I'm like, girl, that's not like, but that's not real. Just like I know that not all of you guys lived in huts growing up and chased hyenas and stuff. It's like, we just have to have those conversations. So I think it's important to be surrounded by people of other cultures so that you can kind of bridge that gap that, you know, like it's portrayed in media and especially through social media. But at the same time, my experience has not been all that great because everybody's so deeply rooted in kind of their cultural beliefs. And it's hard to break that when you've been taught that for generations and generations and generations. It's hard to kind of open up and be like, oh, okay, well, this person, well, that's not necessarily true. Like, you know, like
I'm still telling some of my family members, like, my husband did not grow up in a hut, guys. He grew up in a normal house in Rwanda, like, and it's okay. But yeah, having those conversations, it's really important. Just from my experience, it hasn't gone very great just because, and even with myself, like, I can admit there are some things that I was raised very Southern Baptist. So there's a lot of things that, like, internally I struggle with. And then of course, like, talking to other people about it from other cultures, it can be really difficult, but I still think it's really important to at least just bring it up, have those conversations, because if you don't talk about it, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to be fixed, and we're never going to be able to progress and move forward.
Thank you so much for sharing, Ida. I really appreciate it. Would anyone else want to speak about this topic before we move on?
Yeah, I'd like to speak on it. For me, I am very, very, very vocal. I don't mind having a tough conversation with people who don't agree with me. Like, for example, on my social media, you'll see people saying things like, oh, what about like Black on Black crime, which I have to like then educate them, like, there's no such thing as Black on Black crime. People tend to get in conflict with the people that they're near. You know, we don't talk about white on white crime or Asian on Asian crime. That's not even a discussion because it's not a thing. And how that's just basically used to perpetuate or just to like give cops a pass for police brutality, and it ignores systemic racism and institutional racism and poverty. It ignores so many factors. I also, you know, I bring receipts. So like anything they say, I back it up with like data and stats and facts and, you know, so like I hold them accountable, and I don't like allow them to gaslight me or try to move on. I like hold them to the point, like, okay, so this is the point that you brought up. These are the actual facts to the point that you brought up. Now let's move on to the next one. And I just like to dismantle everything one by one. Like, I have no problem, even if, and they don't even have to like directly be talking to me. They could be like having a conversation with someone else, and I'll just jump in with the facts just because it like really bothers me. And I don't let anything go, like nothing go. I'm one of those. Immigration, like I've done volunteer work, working with refugees. I know a lot more about it. I know about like, so, you know, I bring my situation, like my experience and my education to it. And I love holding people accountable and just making them realize that, like, you know, what I'm saying is not true. And then you have to ask yourself, why am I holding on to this? And it's because of a bias that you don't want to acknowledge. So I'm going to force you to acknowledge it, basically. So that's like my thing. I'm sure I've had a lot of people like unfollow, unfriend. I don't mind. I just keep doing it.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sharkisha. And I think this is a good leeway into Terry Allen's next question in the chat. How often do you discuss race with friends? What frustrates you regarding discussions about George Floyd, BLM, Black Lives Matter, anti-LGBTQ sentiments, systemic racism? What are the joys and difficulties of having those conversations, those tough conversations? Go ahead, Mignon.
I'll go first. Oh, sorry, Mignon.
Sorry. I'm going to give this one to Mignon first, Kerri. Sorry.
I would say I've had conversations about this with my friends before when I was in Milwaukee with my CLP group, you know, the people that I work with. And I remember right when all of the George Floyd stuff started happening, and I was looking at it on the news and on Twitter, and I was just so frustrated. And mind you, in my program, there's only 3 Black people. And me, Tyler, and Rich. Tyler's actually on the call. Hey, Tyler. It's just the 3 of us. So when the topic of race came up, one of my white counterparts, Ellis, he was like, oh, Mignon, I was so surprised you didn't bring up George Floyd and want to talk about it. I'm like, Ellis, I do want to talk about it. I do want to have a deep conversation. But at this moment, I need to process it and digest it before I have this conversation with my white friends. Because if I get into it right now, I can't lie. I'm not going to like you at the end of the conversation. And I need to process how I'm feeling, what I want to say, and verbalize it in a way that you understand. And so later on, when, you know, things started happening, they started bringing it up and they started wanting to talk about it. I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. So we've had very fruitful discussions about it. And it's tough because I'm like, bringing up topics that force them to really acknowledge their own privilege. And I'm like, look, I know this is a tough conversation, but this is my life all day, every day. So if it's hard for you, imagine what I do every single day. So I'm just putting it in your perspective and on your plate. So it's been, of course, tough to have those conversations, but I know it's going to benefit them, and it's going to benefit me, and it's going to benefit our relationship as a whole, because this elephant does not need to continue to sit in the room. We have to address it if we want to move forward. So, you know, I was like, you know, you want to talk about it? You want me to lay down some facts? I will. Let's get into it. So, you know, once you get over that border or that barrier, you know, it's okay. And it also depends on the type of people that you're talking to. You have to talk to somebody when they're ready to listen and want to be receptive. Because if not, you're just talking to deaf ears, and then everything that you say will have no purpose. Make sure you're talking to somebody who wants to absorb and learn. That's number one.
That's great. KERRI, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that sometimes I may be seen as a friend that makes everything about race. And I'm fine with that, right? And it's not necessarily like I do that in every single setting or every single thing. But I do want people to understand how we've come to be as a society with the impact of race and socioeconomic status. And so, I mean, it's very sad and unfortunate, but you may never know what you're going to get with me. And so that's why my friends are my truest friends, because we may go out to brunch one day and we may have a great time, and like we may just like fall out, do whatever we want to do. Or we may go out to brunch one day and I might really dissect like how being raised in a zip code different from like a girl that is exactly, you know, a girl that had the same elementary education as me, and where she is today and where I am today, like just the differences, right? I can dissect that probably throughout the entire brunch. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say, like, it's not something that I shy away from in discussions for sure. But it's also something that I don't give to everyone, right? Like it's not something that I'm just saying like, oh, getting my cup of coffee from Starbucks, let me talk to the Starbucks person about this. But it's definitely something that if you have a chance to be in a setting with me for a decent period of time, and like we're able to let our guards down, like please expect that it's going to come up. So like you can't run, because I don't know if I always do this on purpose, but I definitely have a way to like set up conversations, whether it may be in a car ride, whether it may be in like just a office setting or something. It's not something that you can just chime out of and say, all right, well, I got to go to this next thing. It's not, I don't bring it up if I know that it can end, right? And it's also something that is necessary. I think it's something that's very necessary to have with people. And it's something that if you bring it up, be prepared for like the weight that I can give to it. Like, don't say we're going to bring this discussion up about like this, that, and the fifth, and like you don't want to go on and on with me, right? Because that's we're going to start something that we finish, just to have like a decent understanding. And there's no conclusion ever to those conversations, but it's just like you just want to leave with a decent understanding of where we are in the discussion, and like if we're going to pick back up or if we're going to drop it then and there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing, KERRI. And like something that came to mind, like personally, like I said, I'm friends with MARIAN, and then we have like our mini friend group with our friend Dot, who we all went to Spring Hill with. And like I can talk about race openly and honestly with them. But then for some of my other friendships with some of my white friends from Spring Hill, I'm kind of hesitant because, for example, I saw a Facebook post from one of my really good friends, her mom. And this was, I'm sure you've been keeping up with the story about the white 5-year-old little boy who was killed in, I believe, North Carolina. And, you know, the hashtag say his name became trending, and just like the All Lives Matter thing became trending, and just justice for Cannon. And so her mom shared that post, and like, I was honestly pissed about it. And like, part of like my trouble is like, how do I talk about this with my friend, but also like bringing my frustrations about her mom and her sentiments. So it's like, I can be honest and open with some of my white friends, but others, I don't know. And I think that's what's scary, is like, how can I go into these conversations just being myself and just like presenting myself open, honestly, and transparent. And I'm a person who likes to prove people wrong, or, you know, just like, I always think about people's opinions, which is something that's very bad and I've been struggling with, but it's like, that's where my hardships have come ever since, you know, BLM started back up in action. So if anyone can like address that, like, I really appreciate that.
Wait, Sydney, you're talking about the little boy?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
the little white boy?
Yes, his name was Cannon. I can't remember the last name.
Okay, yeah, I saw it on Twitter about a day ago, and I mean, didn't the guy already get arrested and is sentenced?
He was apprehended in 24 hours.
Okay, exactly. That's like the whole, like, that's not what's not clicking in their head is that, you know, when it's a white victim, like, justice is swift. But when it's a Black victim, like, oh, it's just slow and steady. Like, look at Breonna Taylor. Like, no arrests have been made yet. And I don't know. I just don't understand how people just haven't realized that. Like, I don't understand where's the disconnect. So
So go ahead. You're fine.
So it's very short. I was just going to say, I think the disconnect is like that they solely see it based on race and not like what we're fighting for our race, right? We're mainly fighting for police brutality from like since day one, right? And we're fighting for other things, but it's like, I think that they don't necessarily see that part.
Go ahead, KAMRI.
And something that Marian just said. So I had someone the other day ask me, and it was a white male. He's a gay male, but he's a white male. And he asked me, he said, what's the point of petitions? Like, why do people keep posting about petitions? Basically, excuse my language, he said, what the hell is that gonna do? And I'm like, okay, well, let's break it on down here, because there's a petition, yes, for everything. If you want more Kleenex in the box, you can start a petition for that. But the thing is, when you've tried different things that have not worked, you move on to the next thing to try that. So in certain situations, petitions are that. And, you know, when he said that, it was just like, I don't know what petition he was referring to when he asked that, but, you know, when I saw the post of the little boy say his name, it's like, just like I told Sydney, in those situations when those people do not understand what they're saying, basically when they post these things, it's because they always want to turn that situation back around to reflect them. It's not always about you, and it needs to stop always being about you, because our people, our Black people, are not getting what they need to get. So please stop trying to refer it back to you and refer it back to who it needs to have the attention on right now. And, you know, I mean, to see a little 5-year-old boy get shot, that's absolutely horrible. But I don't know, I feel like I could go on and on about this, and I don't know if I'm making sense on what I'm saying, but
you're making sense.
To go back to having those conversations, I think when it gets to a point where inside you, you're like, I really should say something. When you get that little bitty inkling, don't even back up off of it. Your inkling is happening for a reason, and it's telling you, hey, this is your opportunity to maybe change this person's opinion, or if not change their opinion, at least open their mind up a little bit. And just like Mignon said, I think it was Mignon said, you have to have conversations with people who are ready to change. Even if they're not ready to change, I'm still gonna throw it at you, because maybe the more you hear it, the more you get it, you know? And I feel like, you know, with your question on how do you bring it up, just bring it up. Honestly, people are gonna have something to say about everything. So if they have something to say after you've tried to educate them, or after you've tried to bring something up to them, then that's on them. But you know that you did your part in trying to educate them and talk to them about it.
Thanks, Cam. Appreciate that. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to add to that also, because I have seen that going around on Facebook quite a bit. And with one of my friends, I just asked, I go, okay, so you want justice for Cannon? I go, so where is the system failing him right now? What needs to be remedied that you feel like he needs justice for? What is the outrage that you need Like where, you know, I just call her out on it. You know, she can't highlight it. She's like, I'm just saying it wasn't reported in the news. I'm like, you just shared a news article. So how did you find out about this information if it wasn't reported in the news? Like, do you have a special in that we don't know about? Because I'm seeing it, you know, and I'll highlight the news article. Sorry. But I'll just say, you know, where's the justice? Where's the justice system failing him? What more needs to be done? The person was apprehended within 24 hours, you know? And if they bring it up as a comparison to George Floyd, I go, okay, so you're comparing an individual situation with two civilians to that of someone in a power position who abused that position and it cost someone who's already disenfranchised by the system their life. And you see this as equal, and why do you see it as equal? I just call them out on it, and I make them do the tough work. A lot of the times they don't want to do it, but it's out there now. So now they have to just reflect on it, whether they want to or not.
Mm-hmm. That's a word. Thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else before we transition to another question from the chat?
I did want to say something about the question that you asked me about like talking with friends. I think when George Floyd was murdered, I couldn't imagine the heaviness on your heart of my Black friends. And so you don't call and be like, did you hear? I texted them and was like, my heart's with you right now. Like, I love you. And I'll be here if you need me. Cause it wasn't my place to I don't know. It felt uncomfortable for me to try to be like, let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about it was way too soon. So that for me, it was important to just say I'm here for you in the beginning. And then KAMRI being on the news, you know, in Lincoln, she was literally there getting tear gassed and in the streets. And so trying to just be like, hey, are you okay? I know you were out there trying to be professional and trying to be trying to be a human at the same time. But I think since we've just kind of we've just became friends in the past year or two, and we've created a friendship in a space that I think if we want to talk about something, we talk, and we can kind of if I don't want to say we can but if we can kind of talk about anything, and since I'm in the LGBTQ community, I feel like Cam feels okay to talk to me about. She asks me questions, and we've created a space and a relationship that it's not this is about to be a weird question, but I hate that. We're just let's just if you feel uncomfortable, or if you aren't if you're not ready to talk about something right now, that's but let's that's where you have these conversations when you hear different perspectives. But it's very similar, Cam said earlier too, it's not, you don't just talk about something to be well, this too, if everything's going on with this 5-year-old boy, you don't just also throw in all lives matter. It's not your time right now. Similar to when the Black Lives Matter movement has just re-erupted in a crazy way that I think some actual change is going to happen. I'm not being okay, so me coming from the LGBT community as someone else who's a minority, no, you don't, you just a space to you don't just be I'm also going through some stuff, or I've also experienced discrimination. You don't just talk about something because you maybe have felt something too. I think it's important to just highlight empathy instead of sympathy for people, or I'm not just going down there being hey, that sucks. I'm hey, it sucks. I'm here with you. What do you need me to do? So I think having those conversations with friends, it's you have to be able to create a respectful environment where you feel comfortable to bring up stuff, but not in a way where you're I don't know. What I'm struggling with too sometimes is kind of what KERRI said earlier, and what some of you have also mentioned is how do you know when to just be I don't want you to feel the burden of me asking questions. So how do you you have to make sure that your relationship with someone, I think, is important to me is I'm not always trying to just like take from you and take from you. You're like trying to learn, or you're trying to like give as well, and just be like a human and like a friend with someone, and not just like the token whatever friend, you know? So how do you make sure you're like talking about important conversations, but still, you know, being actual friends, you know? So I hope I answered that question.
That was awesome. I really appreciate you for sharing, KAYLEEN. I think that was wonderful, and I'm sure everyone can agree. I really appreciate your openness and your transparency. Does anyone else want to comment before we move on to the next question? Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so this is another question from Janice Lee in the chat, and she says, this was touched upon briefly by AIDA, but more specifically, what does the panel think the barrier between African Americans, interracial friendships, immigrant communities have seen communication wedges when talking about economic opportunities, business that comes to a community? And I can ask that question again. Okay, I'm going to AIDA. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I said before, this is something that I deal with in my house a lot. My husband is Rwandan, and my daughter is actually adopted from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we deal with a lot of kind of the tension between Africans and African Americans. And then I also have really close friends who are Jamaican because I studied abroad there. And it's like we cannot all three as a group be in a room without something breaking out. And I'll say, like, for my husband, he has said it, like, his kind of stereotypical lens of African Americans came from media. He grew up in Rwanda, so the image that I had of him was Rwandan genocide, Hotel Rwanda. That was all I knew. And that was because that was what was portrayed to me. And as a kid, it's kind of hard for you, especially, you know, like, we didn't grow up with Google just like right at our hands as kids do now. So what was shown to me in school was all that I knew. And all that I was shown in school was Hotel Rwanda. So I had no idea that now today Rwanda was rated the safest country in Africa. I had no idea that it's one of the last places you can go see silverback gorillas. I had no idea of any of those things. I didn't even know that it was a French African country. I just thought it was just like African people like killing each other because that was what was shown to me. And the same thing with him, all he had seen was movies that were about Black Americans, but the movies that were shown there or that he had access to were things like Juice. So he's like, when I think of African Americans, I think of like violent, angry, like the men are overly violent. I'm like, you had a like genocide or Hotel Rwanda, like you guys are violent. So we really had to sit down and have these conversations. But I think even like with the younger kids, it has a lot now to do with how quickly information spreads. And unfortunately, it's still not, we don't see the Africa of Lagos. We don't see the Africa of Kinshasa. We see Lion King, where it's still just safaris and that one tree in the middle of the desert. And it's like, girl, there are billions of people living in Africa. And even like with my daughter, like my daughter said that when she first arrived in the United States, she was bullied mainly by African Americans. And I will say, even when I was in school, the African American kids were bullying the Black people from other countries and things like that. And I really think it just has to do with, we just don't know. And we've been separated so much that it's hard to have the conversation. Like, there are African people who genuinely have hatred for Black Americans. And I saw like, there's an article going around on Facebook where it's like Ghana is telling like Black Americans, like, come home, like we welcome you. And there's Black Americans who are like, well, y'all are the reason for slavery in the first place, and we don't mess with y'all either. I'm like, wait, well, that's not the real narrative. Like, so it's just, I think we've just been taught this hatred. And I think it's the same thing as like racism between like Black people and white people. It's just something that we've been taught, even if it's something subconscious. Like, even if you look at movies like Coming to America, like we see like even him as like this like royal regal African, it's all these furs and all these, like, it's very still kind of like want to be shown as like a, I don't want to say primal, but for lack of better words, but I think it's just the way that we've been taught. We've been kind of conditioned to be like against our own, and we just don't have the information. And even information that comes out is very negative. So yeah, I think that's it. I could talk on this all day long because it's literally my whole life right now.
I appreciate you sharing that. And KAYLEEN, did you want to say something? Okay.
I said I wanted to say something. So I wanted to piggyback off of, it's IDA, right? Okay, I wanted to piggyback off of what IDA said because I too am in a relationship, and I don't like saying African because I've learned. So I am in a relationship with a Nigerian, and so ever since being in a relationship with him, I'm not married to him. He is my boyfriend, but just like IDA, I understand what you're saying. The first night I met this guy, and I don't want to say it, but it was like love at first sight type thing. And the first night I met him, we're talking, and he's like, you know, Nigerians don't really like African Americans, right? And I'm like, sorry, we're both Black. What do you mean? And, you know, he explained it. He ran it down to me. He said, you know, a lot of times what we see is what we see in the movies. Y'all flash y'all's bling and y'all's cars and your women and you're this and you're that. And so just like you said earlier, I'm not, you know, his mom still lives in Nigeria. She cooks every day. She cooks like 4 meals a day. And I'm sorry, I love to cook, but I am not cooking every day. I'm not cooking 4 meals a day. That's just not me. So, you know, in the beginning of our relationship, I had to run it down and I had to say, hey, this is what you grew up with, but this is how I am. And not to say that we're different, but girls who are living in New Orleans or who were born in New Orleans are different than a lot of other African American women because we were just raised differently. And so I say all that to say it is about the learning, because now, you know, when I hear people say certain things or just certain things about, let's say, the motherland, I'm like, you know, that's not always true. Yes, they wear deodorant. No, they don't, you know, live in their huts and run around with lions. And it's funny because in the beginning of our relationship, we joked about that. I would ask him, you know, did you grow up? I think I asked him one day, like, did you grow up watching That's So Raven? And he was like, you think I didn't? And he was like, ooh, I have a vision. Like, it was just a joke that he made because, you know, I assumed that he didn't have that growing up. So with that being said, I think it's really important if you have friends who are of different cultures that you learn from that culture, but not just like we've been saying all day, not just give to me, let me give back to you, let me explain to you, you know, what this means and what that means. And let me tell you why that was a part of how I grew up and why it's still a part of me now. I think that's super, super important. And that, you know, we talk about it all the time. If the future comes and we have children and whatnot, he was raised Catholic, like hardcore Catholic. I was raised Baptist, hardcore Baptist, really. And so I'm like, okay, where are our children going to go to church? Are they going to go to mass with you, or are they going to go to Sunday school with me? And so I think when you have those differences, the more you talk about them, the better your connection with that person is going to be, because you're going to understand more about them and who they are. So, you know, whether that's a friend or a complete stranger or whatnot that you meet in a grocery store, have that conversation. And I think a lot of people are proud of their culture and they're going to want to talk to you about it. It makes them feel good. Those memories that pop up in your head of how you grew up and whatnot, that's going to happen. So I think having those conversations is really important.
And I want to go to Mignon because she has to go very, very soon. So go ahead, Mignon.
No, not too soon. I can stay until 12 my time. So
okay.
Good. But I do have a boyfriend. He's Haitian, and I agree 100% with what you say about how African Americans were probably the source of most of his bullying growing up. And I completely thought it was so mind-blowing because, like you said, we're both Black. I don't get what the issue is. But they would say things like, oh, he's Haitian, he probably eats cats, or he eats dogs and such. And he was like, I used to always have to stand up for myself and fight and fend because I am the same. And I'm like, I 100% agree. But then sometimes we'll be having conversations and they'll be like, well, you know, I'm not African American. I'm like, dude, let's have this conversation. We both have a common enemy. And at the end of the day, when that enemy looks at you and I, they're gonna both think inward. So, you know, get it together. You are in America right now. You're not in Haiti, you know, the first free Black nation. You're not in there right now. You're in America. So we have to keep that in mind. And I kid you not, I learned so much from him. And we have deep conversations about New Orleans and Haiti since it's so similar. And him going to school in New Orleans, he's like, what's this thing called a second line? It's like a Rara Lakai, which is like the second line in Haiti. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why do these houses look like this? And why do y'all say buku like that? He's like, this is just mind blowing. And so we would go back and forth. He's like, y'all ruined Haitian culture. I'm like, no, we didn't. It's just an interpretation of it. Like, calm down. So it's like always that back and forth. And I forget that we are from two completely different cultures. I'm African American and he's Haitian. And yes, you know, we both have brown skin. It's just completely different ways of growing up. Mm-hmm. When he expresses things about how he grew up as far as his parents and how hard they were on him, and I'm like, really? Your parents were that hard on you? They talked to you about this? They whooped you for that? Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. But he was like, well, my parents came here when they were like 12 and 10. You know, they really had to make it on their own and figure things out. And I was the firstborn child, so I was a test bunny. So, you know, it's just a whole lot of cultural differences that sometimes frustrate me when I'm learning about it, because I'm like, that's just not fair. I don't understand. Like, why did you have to grow up like that? Like, you shouldn't have deserved the whipping for something that simple. But, you know, different cultures that we just have to recognize. And it's a beautiful culture at the end of the day. And I'm happy to say that, you know, if we do get married and have children, they're going to be able to speak Creole and French and English, and it's going to be great.
Yes, we'd love to see it. So I'm glad you mentioned Haiti, because that's something I want to talk about. So in 2017, me and MARIAN, we went on a service trip for Spring Hill to the DR, Dominican Republic. And for those of you who don't know, DR is basically next to Haiti. They're on the same island, the same island of Hispaniola. So they're like right next to each other. So they're sisters. But there's a history of like racial tensions and stuff. And so I didn't know that because I wasn't taught that in school. And so for me to go to the DR and go near the border town of Dajabon and see how the police interact with the Haitians who are trying to cross, and go to the market that's open twice a week so they can sell as much, because it's open twice a week. So they have to sell what they have to sell, get as much as they can so they can survive the rest of the week. And so me coming to the DR as a lighter skinned African American, I blended in. They came up to me and they were like, "Eres Dominicana? You know, are you Dominican?" And they based that solely on my appearance and, you know, my hair and my face and just all of these certain things. But then I came to know more about the history. Basically, the DR is a Black country. A lot of the people have African descent, but they don't recognize that. And I think that's formed a lot of the tensions, the racial tensions that develop between Haitians and Dominicans simply because of skin tone. And I think MARIAN, you know, if you want to talk about that, like, she comes from Nicaragua, whatever your experience was in the DR, like seeing that racial tension, even though they're Black, they put themselves higher just because of their skin tone. And so if you have any thoughts about that trip, you know, you can share those.
Well, in the Hispanic community, you see a lot of colorism, even though a lot of Hispanics, we do have a lot of indigenous roots, like the Aztecs, but we also do have African American ancestors, roots, African roots. So to me, that was a very interesting trip, because to me it is so surprising that colorism exists when, you know, like at the end of the day, we're all the same. We share the same blood, really the same ancestors. And I remember the moment that really sticks out in my mind is when we were at the border, the gate, and the guard there was talking about how the Haitians, if they let them in, they're gonna bring crime and drugs and poverty and just all this shit. Sorry. And to me, I was just so astounded by what he was saying, because that's the same thing Americans, white Americans, say about Hispanics coming to the United States. And I was like, how can Dominicans that, have, majority of them have African roots, say that about Haitians when the same thing is being said about them in America? Like, that was so hypocritical. And it's just something that I don't understand, like, and that can be said about, Asians. Asians can be discriminatory and racist towards Black people, but Asians have also experienced, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is why people that have a history of being oppressed, why do they oppress other people, knowing that they've been oppressed themselves? So that's what I would have to say.
Thank you, Marian. Anyone else want to comment before we move on?
I would like to say something. It was that you brought up the difference between the DR and Haiti, because I was just reading an article about it the other day, and it was making me angry, because it was like an aerial view of the border of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And you can see that on the side of the Dominican Republic, it's super lush, forest, and on Haiti's side, it's pretty desolate and brown and no trees, no life. And so people in the comments were saying, well, how could the Haitians do this? How could they tear down all of their trees? Well, they didn't know the history of it. While Haiti is the only freed Black nation, or like the first nation that was freed following slavery or whatever, they had to pay a fine back to France for their independence, for reparations for taking away their plantations and their slaves. They had to pay back $21 billion, which they didn't pay all the way back until maybe the 40s or the 60s. It was crippling debt that France put on Haiti for fighting for their independence. And because of that debt, they couldn't prosper. They worked and toiled their soil until it was completely barren. And that's why they didn't have any exports to give and no money to make. And also the United States put out, I think it's called an embargo, where they couldn't trade with one another. Haiti was on the blacklist because they actually fought for their freedom. So Haiti could not possibly prosper because of the crippling debt that France had put on them. And it's so easy for us to say, oh, well, Haiti could have done this, they could have done that. They're the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. But I would say they're definitely the proudest nation ever. To say that you're a nation of all Black people who fought for your freedom and won is just so amazing. They're some of the most proud, happy people I've ever seen, just like we are in New Orleans. We're very tenacious and resilient. Something absolutely horrible can happen to us, but what do we do in response? We have a party. So it's completely mind-blowing when people are dismissive to Haitians and to Haiti when they don't know the rich history behind it and how it relates so much to the United States. So I urge everybody to look into the history of Haiti. It's very interesting, and something definitely needs to be done to try and, remedy international relations with it. So, yeah.
I think this is a good transition. One of the panelists, or not the panelists, one of the guests participating in this call says, how do we help people unlearn these stereotypes they learned and all the hate that we're taught? Like, what are some things that need to happen, or how can they come about this? Yeah, Sharkisha, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there is a lot of information out there. It's literally everywhere you look. I have personally stopped taking on the burden of educating people because it's traumatic. It's very draining because you're constantly having to remind people why your humanity is valid. So I don't do that anymore. But there's a lot of information available. Netflix has a whole like section on just like the 13th, and there's just a lot of information if you are looking for it. It's like a Google click away. So, that's just my own opinion on it.
Anyone else? Another way that you have to reach people is, and it's unfortunate that you have to say this, but through entertainment, but through the right entertainment. So for me, when I want to learn about something, the first thing I do, I want to see if they have a documentary about this. Why? Because I know that they're going to have, correct information and stuff that's actually going to put me in that, that situation or that event, whatever I'm trying to look up. And I think by telling people, hey, the information is out there, great. But I also feel like they really may not know where to go. Like, for example, when BLM came back up, somebody told me, yeah, this weekend I watched The Help for the first time. And I'm like, oh, great. And like, so I think, yes, it's tiring to educate them, but I think leading them in the right direction will help, especially if they come to you and they say, hey, like, I really, what are the sources out there? What is whatever? I guess, for this, it's like, it's on the fence. It's like, you don't want to show them, but then like, sometimes you have to, I don't know. But I feel like, we've been saying this all the time, the conversations have to happen. Yeah, they have to happen. I think between conversations, reaching people through entertainment, and not everybody is a reader. So I don't expect people to actually sit there and read this article and then come back to me and have a conversation about it. So helping them find ways that may be interesting to them. Like, for example, coming up actually here in Lincoln, and KAYLEEN, by the way, I want to send it to you because I think we should go together if we can. It is this show and it's called Step Africa. And I am in a Black sorority, so I would love to go for that aspect. And it's also supposedly going to show us like the history of stepping and how that came about and whatnot. So I'd love to see that. So that's something that, if I had someone, a white counterpart or whatever, who wanted to go, come on, let's go. Just like I said, I had friends who came with me to the Juneteenth celebration that I went to. So I think inviting them to do these interactive type things in places where they're gonna learn is important. Even simply, we have social media now. Share the link. If you share the link and have it where people can directly go to it, not where they have to go through this long process to get there. But, people's attention spans aren't long. So if you share that, they might click on it if they're interesting or if they're interested in it. I mean, I see it a lot of times if I see a post and I'm like, oh, what's this? I'm going to click on it and then I'm going to read about it and then I'm going to watch the video about it. So through social media as well, like there's so many ways you can reach people nowadays. It's kind of ridiculous.
That's great. Does anyone else want to comment before we transition?
Yeah, I just want to add one other thing. Like if someone does tell you something, like a person of color does say something like, this is my experience or this is what's going on, like believe them. Don't, just because it doesn't fit your narrative or your perspective or it's not a part of your world. Like I think a lot of it is that a lot of people, like white people, for example, don't realize that we navigate two very different worlds. So they'll ask you something and then you'll give them a direct answer. And because it doesn't fit into what they believe or what their perspective is or what their experience is, they automatically negate it. And they go, well, that doesn't make sense. It may not make sense because it's not a part of your world. It's not something that you're used to or even exposed to. So that's a big part if you want to unlearn a lot of the things that you've learned and the stereotypes. If someone says, this is my truth, this is my reality, don't question it, just believe it.
Oh, that's fantastic, Sharkisha. Thank you so much. So I want to go to one of my last questions, and this is kind of a two-parter because first, now that we talked about, things that we can do to unlearn what we've been taught through stereotypes, entertainment, what are some of the values that you've all developed from being in interracial friendships, and what do you believe what do you believe interracial friendships will look like in the future? And this is a question for everyone, so you can go if you want to. Go ahead, Theresa.
So something that I've learned, is probably gonna laugh at this, but I don't know when to stop talking. Like my whole life, well, now I do, but when I was younger, I never thought before I spoke. I never thought before I acted. When I was little, I used to get in a lot of trouble because I just did everything on, immediately. So, in these interracial friendships that I have, I've learned to just shut up. And that's really humbled me in a lot of ways because it was always like, well, I have kind of like, I don't remember who brought it up, but, when I was younger, I could say like, well, I completely understand what you're going through because I've been through something like that. And now I'm like, no, I haven't. Like, no, I haven't. I've never gone through something like that. Where am I? And that was my way of just trying to empathize with someone, but it wasn't coming off the right way. So, now I've learned to shut up. And, like what Sharkisha just said, every experience that I've been told by like, any of my interracial friends or in our groups or anything, I don't question it. Even if it's something that I'm like, I've never had to experience that, then I realize like, check your privilege, look at yourself in the mirror, listen to the story, believe it, and move on. And I think that has been something that started in high school and just has progressed so much because of, the relationships that I made in college. And, like KERRI was saying, just having friends that you might be stuck in a car with them for 6 hours and they're going to be like, so how do you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement? And you're in a car, like you're going to have that conversation. And so, yeah, it's learning to shut up and learning to absorb what has happened in your other friends' lives and honor what they want you to, or how they want you to respect them.
Great. Go ahead, KAMRI.
Sorry, so she just sparked up something in my head that the other day I reminded myself, do not judge a book by its cover. And I was on a story, we had a viewer call about this story, so I went out to go do the story. Basically, it's a group of all these white men. They are all over the age of 60. The oldest one is turning 80 in September. And it's a group of retired firemen, retired cops, retired farmers, retired truck drivers, retired, all these groups of people. And I'm like, okay, they send the little Black girl to go do this story. I'm like, I don't know what I'm setting myself up for. So I pull up to the house and I don't see any Trump paraphernalia, but I see, a lot of American flags and whatnot. I'm like, okay. So I go and I'm talking to these guys and I'm, grabbing their video. Basically, it's about them that before COVID hit, they would meet at this coffee shop every morning and have coffee and donuts and breakfast every morning. And since that stopped, and because they are older, they stopped doing that. But then they started to get together in the 80-year-old's garage every day and do the same thing, but they're social distancing, like they sit 6 feet apart, they wear masks, they do what they need to do. And so I went to go cover it. And, as I'm talking to the guys after I interview them, I'm just grabbing some video. And one of them asks me the question, and he's like, hey, so how do you feel about if Biden wins? And I'm like at this point, y'all, I didn't know what the heck to say. Like, do I really answer what I want to say, or do I lie? Like, I was just, I didn't know what to say, so I'm just like, I literally do the most awkward laugh there is. And so I diverted from answering. I was like, 2020 has thrown a lot of stuff at us, and if that happens, it happens. I think that's what I said. It was something really stupid. And I learned from that moment, the guy was like, well, I'm going to tell you what I think. And they were all for it. They were all for it. And I'm like, whoa, I'm over here judging them thinking, they're pro MAGA and pro this, and they weren't. And, I went to go tell them, a lot of them were retired veterans as well. And so I went to tell them that, my dad is a veteran himself and he served in the Army and whatnot. And they're like, hey, whenever your dad comes and visits, he's welcome to join us for a cup of coffee. And I'm like, all of y'all old white men want my little young Black dad to come join you for some coffee. And I just thought it was the cutest, sweetest thing. And it just, sorry, now I diverted from the question, but what was the question again, Sydney? I'm so sorry. I'm trying to reel it back in.
No, it's okay. Just some of the values that you've gained just being in interracial friendships, and what do you think the future of interracial friendships will look like?
Yeah, so that's why I was saying this. Yeah, that's why I was saying this, that to not judge a book by its cover. So, you know, like I've been saying this entire time, when those conversations happen, you don't know what you have in common with that person. You don't know, you know, I had another instance where this woman, I was literally on a random story, and this woman asked me before I left, she said, KAMRI, what can I pray for you for? And I'm like, you know, she was an older white woman. And I'm like, wow, who's really ever asked me, how can I pray for you? And, you know, I took that as, just again, don't judge a book by its cover, and that the future of relationships, I feel like you're going to see it a lot more. And why? Because people are now learning, first of all, they're understanding, and they're willing to be there with you, be there for you, and understand where you're coming from. And just like I'm friends with KAYLEEN about it, I don't know if I would feel open to asking other people about certain like LGBTQ questions that I may have for KAYLEEN or whatnot, but with me being comfortable enough to ask her that, I feel like a lot of those relationships are definitely going to happen within the next, I'd say within the next couple of years, because now people are realizing we can come together. We don't have to be the same to be friends. And matter of fact, us being different is probably going to make our friendship a little bit more exciting, a little bit more interesting to be in.
That's great. And KERRI, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mignon, go ahead.
I agree with KAMRI as far as don't judge a book by its cover, because I had a friend, well, now she's my friend, but a person in my program. And of course, like before I met everybody, I did my research on each person, going through their Instagram. And this girl was in a picture with somebody who looked like they had a Trump hat on, a Make America Great Again hat. And so I was like, oh, absolutely not. I'm writing you off. If you could support that, get out of my face. Well, she wound up being my roommate when we had to go like to training together in Milwaukee. So I was just like, I'm not gonna like it, not gonna like it. And then all of a sudden we were getting ready in our individual rooms, and I heard Doja Cat playing, and I know she's canceled, but I heard Doja Cat playing, and I was like, you listening to Doja Cat? She's like, yeah. I was like, all right, I think this can work. And then when I looked at the picture closer that I saw where the person was wearing a MAGA hat, it said something completely different. It did not say Make America Great Again. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, we can be friends. So we started getting closer and closer. And she's now one of, I can say, my best friends in the whole world. And we've been friends probably a year now. Her name is Molly Messina. And she grew up in Covington, also super white area in Louisiana. And I was like, writing her off, but no. You know how I know she's one of my best friends ever? I had braids when I started work. And I was like, Molly, I wouldn't ask you this, but you know, we're roommates now. So like, can you help me take my braids out? It's like, yes, absolutely. So we both sat on my bed. She's helping me take the braids out and everything. My hair is like probably like this big. And she was just talking away and enjoying herself. I'm like, you are going to be one of my best friends if you could sit here and help me take braids out for hours. Then another instance, I went to a protest with one of my other coworkers, and she couldn't come because she was out of town. And she was like, look, where I'm at, there are no protests happening, but I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. And she's constantly signing petitions, sending money to different organizations to try and help and contribute in some sort of way. And she also sent myself and my other coworker $15 for dinner. She was like, this is for fighting the good fight since I can't be there. And I'm like, this is how you show up for your Black friends. She is absolutely amazing. And I can tell that there are more relationships that I'm going to encounter like that in the future. And like KAMRI said, don't judge a book by its cover, and don't write off people before, like off of predispositions and pre-thoughts that you have of them, because I can say I'm probably going to be the godmother of her child one day. So that's for sure.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're
interaction friendship
a little bit, so we're going to try to like wrap it up quickly. So I want to go to KERRI next.
Can you restate the question again really quickly?
What do you believe the future of interracial friendships will look like?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So earlier you guys heard me explain as to like how I haven't really made many friends out of like just mainly Black Americans or like the African diaspora since leaving college. And so honestly, like I see the future of friendships as like my friends from college. So like oftentimes like Theresa will explain like the little things she's done for me from a general perspective, but the race relations that I was able to talk about and share with like a lot of my friends in college is just like weirdly unheard of. Like Mion, you talked about how your friend helped you take out your wig. So I definitely had some friends actually helping me braid my hair. Like I would just say like, this is gonna take me forever. Like this is this, this is that. And they would just be like, oh, let me help you. Let me do this. Let me do that. Because then I didn't know it, but they were understanding and they were slowly learning for themselves, like what it takes to like be a Black American, but for also me to be a Black woman. And so for them to not only like start learning right then and there, but also to like put in their time and energy to help me with those processes of like what I do. I think that's very important. And one thing that it hit me when Sydney even like sent us information about this discussion. But I think I am, you know, there's a lot that we can say about going to a predominantly white institution, but there's also a lot I could say about my friends that I went to that school with and the friends that I still have from that school. Like there are some people that, you know, you only stayed at school, you know, only kept in the mix because it was comforting for everyone and they had mutual friends and blase, blase. But there, I knew what it meant for white people to step up for me during that time period. And I didn't know exactly what it was. I didn't know exactly what it was, but there were several times when like I would have to vividly and like just go into explain to them why they couldn't do this or why they couldn't do that. But also like they would definitely take the pressure of saying like, one thing about me, and I didn't mention this earlier, I would do anything unless it's illegal. So we would listen. I would do just about anything as a friend unless it's illegal. And so when we thought that something might get us into trouble here, that you've been there before, but never once did I have to question like, are these people going to make me take the fall? Like, are they not going to stand up for me when someone else comes, when a authority comes into the mix and an authority wants to blame me? And never once did I have that impression, right? Because you've heard it before, like, don't be traveling through the deep south on road trips and, this, that, and the fifth. And so never once did I have to have that like question in my head. But I think the future of friendships will look like the friendships that I fostered in college, but I think they will be way more open to like, now we understand, just unconsciously we understand when moving about in certain things. Like I don't have to worry about sending my kids to their house because they might say, oh, like your hair is to this or your hair is to that, or like like, oh, let me make you fried chicken for dinner. Like, doggone well, you were the one eating fried chicken in college and I wasn't, sweetheart. So, but I don't have to worry about those things because I made sure that I have like I made sure that I've turned that doorknob into everyone's like home or whatever. And just making sure like, not only do I know where these friends come from, but I know where they come from. Like, I'm sorry, not only do I know these friends like based on like how I know them, like in the physical form in their like surface level, but I know the behind the scenes. And so when Theresa's mom came on, I was more excited than like, and I texted Theresa, was like, oh my God, your mom's on, because since day one, like I knew Theresa because I knew of the home that she came from. Like I never really knew her parents. Like I probably met her parents maybe once out of all the years of knowing her, maybe once. Right. But they embraced me like within a second, and they embraced everyone within a second. And I can say that for the same about every friend that I have, right? No matter what the race is, right? And I challenge like my parents to be like that too, because vice versa. Like I don't want anyone to like send their kids with me growing up and we try to change their whole culture, right? Like the color of friendship, right? Like we want to make sure that like we we understand and we consciously know like the historical relevance of like what our race plays into everything, but we also let the kids and everyone after us be like extremely more free than we ever once was, because they should not have to bear the burden of what we've had to like understand and weigh in on since we were little kids.
That's awesome. Does anyone else want to go? This is open to everybody, but everybody doesn't have to comment if they don't want to. Go ahead, Sharkisha.
For me, interracial friendships going forward it's like having those friends who will speak up, like you were saying, like and advocate for you. Like for me, it really always comes back to like my children, and I just need to know that if they're in a situation where they're being racially profiled or they're exposed to something, that person that they're with is going to be very vocal and advocate and make sure that they feel safe and welcome. And so that's what it looks like for me going forward. I already have a lot of that now, like even just like in my social media, like if I were to say something and I have like a troll or someone who is coming on with the MAGA crap, like my white friends will be like on it, you know what I mean? Because they're like, we don't want you to even to do the labor of having to like combat that. Like I'm here and I'm just gonna check them. And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes having someone who looks like you give you the information for the message to be received. Like they could literally be saying the exact same thing I'm saying, but for some reason they're not willing to receive it unless it comes from someone who looks like them, who have the same socioeconomic or financial background as they do. So it's the same information, they just don't want to receive it from me. So I think that going forward, it's just in general, overall, it's going to be a lot better. Like, because if you even look at across like TikTok, for example, like these young kids are just like woke as hell. Like they're like speaking up, speaking out. They're like calling their parents out, calling their teachers out, calling their neighbors out. I mean, they're like putting all their info out there and they do not care about losing people. I mean, you got these like teeny boppers with the skinny jeans getting like tear gas and coming back for more and being like, bring it, So it's like, I think that going forward, it's going to be just a better world overall as far as like interracial relationships or friendships go, and not just like ignoring each other's cultures, but like accepting it, learning from it, embracing it. And like no more this I don't see color. It's like I see color. This is who you are. I acknowledge it. I think it's great. This is a part of who you are. I don't understand it. I want to learn more. Versus everyone, because like don't erase. You see color, and when you do that, when you ignore color, you ignore what everyone's gone through. Their what the oppression that they dealt with. So I think that we are seeing a lot of that being done away with.
That's great. We can get 2 more responses if people want to respond. Go ahead, Maddie.
So in regards to like what I think interracial friendships are going to look like, just like off of Sharkisha's point, we're constantly evolving. Like the world around us is continuously changing. And I was having this conversation with my friend Samantha, and she was saying that with her and like her culture, because she's Spanish and Jewish. So, coming from that like diversity, she's been able to learn a lot about like other people and their cultures. And in regards to me, when everything happened she's seen me like be a huge advocate for the Breonna Taylor movement. It's a huge thing for me. So she's more on the sideline saying, okay, what do you need me to do? Do you need me to sign something? Do you need me to send money and things like that? And it's just like that allyship that we're seeing now more than ever. And I think as we continually evolve, I see more interracial friendships happening just because, we're also bored of the same thing. We're not in that same place anymore where we can just hang out with one person who just looks exactly like us. We're continuously evolving. So as we grow as a community and as this movement grows too, you just see so many people from all walks of life supporting this movement. And you're gonna continuously see it because people are tired, they've had enough, and they're more open to having those real honest conversations that we haven't seen years ago. And especially because they also wanna be in it. Like they're more proactive, they're more active in the communities, trying to get this message out to their own families and friends. You know, I think that's the best part that I've seen about this, is that literally everyone is tired and they're showing up and they're doing something about it.
Amen to that. Is there anyone else that wants to go before we transition to our closing remarks? Go ahead, THERESA.
I just wanted to add something because I work in higher ed. And you know what SHARKISHA said is so true, because these students right now are so brilliant. Like, they are so unafraid to stand up to their classmates, and they're so unafraid to stand up to their teachers. And I mean, I just graduated from college 2 years ago, but it's such a change, and it's so uplifting that even like if I say something, my students aren't afraid to call me out. Like, that to me is such a beautiful relationship. And I've told them time and time again, you know, they don't have to educate me on anything, but if they want to, they're welcome to. And just saying something like that has opened up so many coffee conversations, dinners, lunches, just talking about anything. And, you know, like I said, they are calling each other out, and it is awesome. Like, it is such a cool thing to watch. And they educate each other in a way where they're not disrespectful. And I think that's something that they've learned. And I think that's something that this age of parents has done a phenomenal job of doing, and just teaching and treating the students and, you know, as their children with respect. So I think we are going to see, you know, new beautiful friendships. And I think we're going to have a lot harder conversations that are necessary and that for years people just ignored because they said, you know, like, but we're really good friends and we're in the same sorority and it'll be okay. Like, they care about me. And now, you know, you're seeing people say, do you care about me? Let's talk about it right now. So I love it. And, you know, we are going to be, in my opinion, I think we're going to be okay because of the generation below us.
That's awesome. MARIAN, did you want to add something really quick?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that, I mean, right now I think everyone's still stuck on being friends with people that look like them. You know, we are making progress towards having friends of other religions, skin colors, ethnicities, cultures, and all that stuff, but we're not there yet. And but I think we will get there eventually, and that's really dependent on us listening to each other, like listening to other experiences. I don't think it's just, yeah, a part of it is to like be quiet, but another part of it is genuinely listening to what that other person has to say, because if you're not listening, it's just going one ear and out the other. You're not learning anything.
That's great. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all, ladies, for participating today. Your input was valued. I've learned so much in this 2-hour period. So for now, I want to turn to Shades Magazine founder and publisher, Michelle Fitzhugh-Craig. Michelle.
Hey, everybody. This is great. You know, if I can get you guys to do your clap or your thumbs up little emoji if you enjoyed today's talk. I just want to thank everybody that participated. KAMRI, Madison, MIGNON, KERRI, THERESA, MARIAN, KAYLEEN, SHARKISHA, and AIDA. And most importantly, thank you so much, Sydney, for hosting this again, and just agreeing to be a part of these real talks and have the difficult discussions that we need to sometimes. And also, kind of quiet there is Lyndsey Ellis, who is on our board as well, as she said earlier. And I just want to thank you both because they're the two that kind of put this together, discuss the ideas. And as I said before, if you have questions about this later or comments later or ideas about future topics that we can do. And the makeup is not always going to look the same. We are trying to get more women in and swap out. So if you know someone or you want to be a part of it, please let us know. You can email us at infoshadesmagazine@gmail.com or DM us on any of the social media platforms, because we are on all of them. So I hope you are. If you haven't yet, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even Pinterest. So just a reminder, again, this was recorded today and it will be available on YouTube starting on Tuesday, so you can share with your friends. Follow us on the YouTube channel as well. And just hats off to everybody, because you really did a great job, and I'm really happy to see so many lovely faces that want to discuss. And this is the future right here. Marian talked about listening, but also being willing to talk and not be afraid to talk. And that's what we need. And I'm excited for the future. See what happens. That's it. Back to you, Sydney.
All righty. And I just like to end with a quote to close out things. And this is from Maya Angelou. And she said, "There's a marked difference between acquaintances and friends. Most people really don't become friends. They become deep and serious acquaintances. But in a friendship, you get to know the spirit of another person and your values coincide. A friend will stand for you when you are no longer able to. A woman can say to herself, if I die, I know that my friend, my sister friend, will be here to hold up the banner." And with that, I just want to thank you guys, and I appreciate you guys for coming on today and giving your input, your values, and your experiences. And have a great rest of the weekend, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for hosting this.
Stay safe. Wear a mask.
Cry with that quote. That quote was amazing. If you can you send that to all of us? Because that was great.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to paste it. Yay.
Oh my gosh, Kitty.
Thank you, everyone. I'm ending it.
Bye,
Talk
Sydney.
amongst yourselves later. Bye.
Bye.